Hello. Welcome to the 75th episode of Censored. That seemed like it might never happen.
It still might not.
It still might not happen.
It's very touch and go.
Oh my God, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, but we're gonna get into some of that. We're gonna get into some of where Eleanor has been, up in New York. But by the way, for those of you just joining us, this is the show where we talk censored stories and people sensible solutions and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And sometimes none of the stuff. All right. So, and we're part of the Popular Resistance Podcast Network. But let's get into it. We got a lot of things coming up on this show. We're gonna talk about the impeachment inquiry that is going on right now, because I wasn't going to talk about it, but then it's just getting too funny to
well,
avoid.
And we happened to be a day late anyway, so then it almost seemed like the stars aligned perfectly to have this happen just
right,
so that we could discuss it on our podcast.
Right. Fair point. And we're also going to get into the climate strike, people mobilization and shit. And maybe some more stuff, sometimes other stuff. But let's dive into the Biden, the Joe Biden impeachment inquiry that's happening with Donald Trump. For those of you who have not had on the mainstream media, which I congratulate you, apparently the Democrats have finally decided to do an official impeachment inquiry on Donald Trump. This is based on a whistleblower who we still don't know who it is or the details of what they were going to say, but apparently journalists, if you call them that, were able to find out that it had to do with Trump's calls to the Ukrainian president to try and force him to start a investigation into Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who was on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. And they were saying that perhaps Trump said, we will give you either we will give you extra money or we will withhold your foreign aid if you don't do this, which is considered corruption and illegal. Now,
but wasn't Biden already? So the other layer of this isn't.
I have a feeling you're gonna jump ahead.
Oh,
but
should I not?
Because I kind of want to lay it out.
Okay, I'm sorry. You set your scene and build your set design and all that shit. You go for it.
But I don't know whether you were gonna jump ahead or not. I just want to lay this out because it is so fucking hilarious. And by the way, I do talk about some of this Unredacted tonight, which I'm writing at the moment, but I promise you that this gets deeper into it and in kind of a different way. So you're getting more here on the podcast than just the TV show. Oh, God, it's so fucking funny. I don't even know where to start. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the fact that the quid pro quo thing, that level of corruption, that is done endlessly in all of this shit. Like every agreement we have with every other country is guess what? We give you lots of foreign aid. Do this shit for us. Guess what?
Especially after there's a coup.
Right. And that doesn't mean they have to say it, but you don't think Netanyahu knows that they get billions of dollars of weapons from us? You don't think that Trump knows that the U.S. gets basically its own outpost in the Middle East from Israel, along with many other things, along with, we get security training from their Mossad. Like, we get all kinds of shit from Israel. But, they just know this shit. They don't have to say it on the phone. You don't have to be like, I might withdraw my weapons I sell to you. So this quid pro quo thing to me is kind of hilarious. And by the way, I don't want this to just come off as a endless defense of Donald Trump. I fucking hate Donald Trump. I'm fine with impeachment, although Eleanor and I have talked about multiple times how it's not really going to do much. It's just going to put Pence in there, who is arguably even more of an ideologue. But so to get into what Hunter Biden, so this is the part that the mainstream media wants to gloss over or fully ignore, because, and I know that you, Eleanor, are lucky enough not to have CNN all day long, but in the news offices I'm in, it's on the screen. They're talking endlessly about the wrong that Trump has likely done by pressuring the Ukraine to open this investigation. But they are glossing over or saying, well, there's no wrongdoing with Biden's son. let's talk about why Biden's son would be at an energy company in the Ukraine, on the board of an energy company, according to the New York Times, collecting $50,000 a month, over $500,000 a year, to be on the board of an energy company. Is he particularly gifted at gas and energy? Is his career energy-based? Is his career company-based? Is it boardroom-based? Does Hunter Biden know shit about an energy company? The answer is no. No connection to energy, gas, oil, whatever, no connection to companies. In fact, a month or so before he joined this energy board, what was Hunter Biden doing? He had just been let go from the Naval Reserves for cocaine. So, look, I have no problem with people's personal drug use, but it
doesn't qualify you to be on the board of an energy company.
It doesn't. And how much blow do you have to do to get kicked off the Naval Reserves? I mean...
well, yeah. And if you're a Biden, like, you have got to do an astronomical amount of blow. Yeah, well, that was the point that I was going to get to, is that, of course...
I was right. You were going to steal my thunder. I knew it.
This is like a fucked up layer cake that really speaks to the layers of corruption that the U.S. has and works off of. Because, yes, it's fucked up that Trump is calling and pressuring people to prosecute. It's fucked up that there's anything to prosecute. It's fucked up that we can stage a coup in a country and then just be like, hey, well, you got to take these people onto your fucking board, and you've got to let these people help run your country and your natural resources, which is, of course, why our empire creates coups and creates economic warfare and literal warfare, is because a lot of times because of natural resources. So the fact that there's even anything for Trump to call and pressure someone over is disgusting. And that's something. Can you impeach a vice president that's not vice president anymore? I wish you could. Because if so, I would love to fucking impeach Biden. And the fact that that's being glossed over to such an extent that Biden is being shown as the victim here, as opposed to, you need to drop out of the race, you corrupt piece of shit.
Right. I know. They think that this is their golden key because Russiagate failed to get Trump for impeachment. But in fact, the Dems don't seem to realize that this is revealing how this whole corrupt system works. Like, this is outing all of it. Why would that energy company want Hunter Biden on their board? What do you think he did? Well, I'll tell you what he did. He was fucking Joe Biden's son sitting on their board. That was the whole point of it. That was the entirety of it. It meant that they get a de facto quid pro quo from the Obama administration. We have the fucking vice president's kid on our board. What do you think that's going to do for us? Who knows? It's a nice chip, though, to cash in later. And did it get cashed in? Well, guess what happened a little later. Now, Joe Biden said publicly, and we have the video of him at like a book talk on a panel or something a year ago, I think, or 2 years ago, saying that he went over to the Ukraine, and it was supposed to be an announcement about how the Obama administration was giving them something like $1 billion in loan guarantees, helping out the Ukrainian government, which, by the way, we worked with Nazis to create that coup, and you can find those articles throughout,
the Ukraine has a huge white supremacist nationalist.
So we helped fund and prop up and further the Nazi causes so that they could take over the Ukraine, which they succeeded. And So Joe Biden goes over there, and this is what he says publicly. This is not some theory. This is what he said publicly. I went in there, and I said, they have a real corruption problem over there. So I said, you have to get rid of this prosecutor. Now, what he didn't mention is this prosecutor at the time was probably not looking into Hunter Biden, but was looking into this energy company or, investigating them that Hunter Biden worked at. So Joe Biden said to the president, you get rid of this prosecutor. And the president said, we're looking into it, but we can't really. Basically, hemming and hawing. Biden then said to him, well, then I'm not announcing your loan guarantees. This is what Biden is publicly saying he did. So he said, look, this is his story. I get on a plane in 6 hours. If that prosecutor's gone, you get your $1 billion loan guarantee. If he's not gone, I'm getting on that plane. And by the way, he adds in there that the president of Ukraine then said, you can't do this. You're not the president. And Biden said, call him up. Yes, I can. And Biden concludes the story by saying, guess what? That son of a bitch was gone within 6 hours. So
We came, we saw, he died.
yeah. So basically, Biden is saying, I went to the Ukraine. I said, get rid of this prosecutor that is looking into my son's oil company. And, they love leaving that part out as if that part doesn't matter. Like the mainstream media will talk about how Biden got rid of this prosecutor, but say, even Biden has said, I didn't know he was looking into the energy company. Yeah, right. Fuck you. So it publicly said, so the public admission that Biden is proud of is we, the Obama administration, the U.S. government, went into the Ukraine, helped create a coup, propped up the Nazis, put in a Nazi-friendly government, offered them $1 billion of loan guarantees. When their prosecutor started looking into my son on an energy company board, getting paid $500,000 a year, I said, get rid of that fucking prosecutor, you lose your $1 billion, and they fucking did it. And that's what he's proud of. That's him saying, yeah, I did that.
Well, Biden has said before, I regret nothing, which was in reference to Anita Hill, but it also covers a shit ton of other things like war crimes. But this also speaks to, yesterday I was at an event with diplomats from Iran and, Iran couldn't make it because they're not allowed to, from Venezuela. And the Jorge Ariaza, who's the foreign minister for Venezuela, was reading a statement by Pompeo where Pompeo literally says that they are engaging in this economic warfare because it's good for the United States. There's and this is not unusual. Like that we've seen people blatantly say that, oh yes, we're going to war for oil. Like the kind of overt admissions that people in power.
Bolton said it on Fox News.
Right.
It'd be really good to get our oil companies.
Yeah.
In there.
The overt admissions of these people in power are becoming more and more brazen. As if
because they know the media will carry their water and they know they won't be accountable for it.
Right. And of course also because unfortunately the anti-war movement or the anti-foreign intervention movement is flaccid at best, which is
it's been
something that we're going to talk about in a minute, but
it's been systematically defanged and chopped up, so it's not.
Sure, but that's, everything has, you look at, people talk about COINTELPRO like it's something that happened.
Yeah, in the past, yeah.
But and for those who are not aware, COINTELPRO was basically an FBI mission to infiltrate and break down the Black Panther movement, the anti-war movement in the 60s and 70s, which was overwhelmingly successful. Yeah. But that's not something that happened. It's happening. Recent reports show that many activists with Black Lives Matter and other racial justice movements are on that list. Folks that were involved in the Dakota Access Pipeline and many other pipeline fights are on FBI watch lists and are victims of infiltration. What's the word? Infiltration by the FBI. So this is an ongoing. This is something that we continue to see to this day.
The difference is in the 70s, maybe even up until early 80s, Americans still had the ability to be shocked that this stuff was happening. Now everyone just goes, yeah, well, okay, yeah. They're spying on they're watching all of our email. All right, like it's not. There's no shock there, but. Anyway, we'll wrap up the Biden thing here in a second, but I'm just like watching the mainstream media froth at the mouth for they're acting like we finally got him. We finally got Donald Trump for something that's impeachable. And look, in general, I say, yeah, fucking impeach him. Yeah, pressuring another president to do something based on aid, absolutely. That'd be, if you got that, fucking impeach him. But also, you should impeach all the past presidents. And I'm not arguing that Trump's not corrupt. I'm just arguing that the idea that Biden is this, they act like he's fucking, Nelson Mandela skipping around the world handing out Tootsie Rolls. And it's his fucking, what he's admitted to publicly should be a criminal offense. And the idea that his son is placed on a board getting $500,000 a year for from a fucking Nazi government that we put in power is fucking incredible. It's incredible.
And yet it's nothing new, as you pointed out. And again, this impeachment, and right before we started the podcast, because I've been doing a bunch of other stuff, organizing people's mobilization the past few days, so I have been a little bit out of the loop. And so I asked Lee, "Oh, I thought was it the emoluments clause, or would they finally get him on?" And Lee laughed, and he was like, "Are you kidding? Because then they would have to get like every other president for the emoluments clause, and they'd have to really talk about the aspect of enriching yourself based on your public office, which is basically our entire fucking political system." So this throws into focus that big issue of like, well, why don't you impeach him for putting pressure on Venezuela for no fucking reason,
because
or
they all
Iran,
support
or
it. They support
exactly?
all
But that's
it.
the thing. It's like, oh, because Obama did that,
Right.
and Bush did that, and Clinton did that, and like there are 19 countries that are under sanctions from the United States. So the idea that you could, impeach a president for doing what is basically against international law is absurd. So you have to get him on something stupid like this, or, in the case of Clinton, for having an extramarital affair and for being a fucking creeper.
Right. So they're all bending over backwards to find the thing to impeach Trump that doesn't hit on all the other Democrats or the other Republicans in the Senate who, let's face it, they're all good friends.
And yet it does at the same time, because Trump just did what Biden was doing, but from the other side. So it still does.
Yeah, but Biden had that extra layer of protection where he can go, "I didn't know they were looking into my son's energy company."
You mean he can form somewhat more coherent sentences than Trump can?
Yeah, in a certain sense, until his teeth fall out, and then his fake eye turns around backwards, and he's really creepy.
Anybody just ready for him to show up at the next debate as the crypt keeper? Because I'm totally waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. Listen, Joe Biden, you can have all the plastic surgery you want. That's not going to make that plastic eye and plastic teeth any less creepy. It's still freaking us all out.
Oh God.
There was what was the one last thing I wanted to say? Impeachment, inquiry, energy. Yeah, maybe I went through it all. But and by the way, Hunter Biden stepped down from this board of this energy company almost like a month before, or very close to the time when Biden was announcing his run for the presidency, because they knew this would be an issue. Even without the Trump thing, even without Trump pushing prosecution, they knew that his son being given this prime spot on a Ukrainian energy board was probably not the best thing to be talked about.
And yet, of course, as you pointed out at the beginning of this episode, it's not a thing for corporate media. They're all just focusing on the fact that Trump is pushing this, and the Democrats. I mean, it really is like it's the perfect play of politics, right? The Democrats, who have gotten so much pressure from the Mick resistance to start impeachment proceedings, are like, oh great, we can start it on this. Then everyone will focus on why we've started these impeachment proceedings against Trump, and kind of let the whole Biden issue fade to the background, and people won't be focusing their ire on Biden, but rather Trump for having the audacity.
Right. It was kind of a preemptive strike, because they knew this stuff about Biden would come out. And by the way, Trump is probably going to try and get this off the front news covers by, tweeting out a dick pic or something, and then they'll all talk about that for a few days. But it blows my mind, the level of corruption involved. And oh, by the way, even The Intercept is basically carrying water for Joe Biden and his son. There was an article, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, saying the mainstream media is furthering right-wing lies. And their point was that in the New York Times article about Hunter Biden, about him getting kicked off the Naval Reserves, about him joining this energy board, they go, it's not till the 6th paragraph that they mention and it's only one sentence that says, there's been no wrongdoing found with Hunter Biden. And it's like, no, it's not about him doing wrong. It's about why is he
there in the first place?
And why did Biden hold up $1 billion in loan guarantees to shut up the prosecutor? It's not about Hunter Biden, whether he did wrong or not.
No, it's about how the fuck did he get into that position in the first place.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna have an aneurysm.
We gotta move on.
We gotta move on. Some real quick things. I have a separate YouTube channel that you may not know about, youtube.com/momentofclarityshow. Moment of Clarity show. And that's where I do mainly my web exclusive videos. I'm doing a bunch of those a week. So please go subscribe at that one. Click the little bell icon so they actually email you with that. That channel's also less suppressed than my main channel. You can get all of Eleanor's work at artkillingapathy.com. That's artkillingapathy.com. And if you feel you're getting $1 worth out of this podcast, please head on over to patreon.com/commoncensored. Thank you to all the new subscribers. We've had several in the past couple weeks, and we love you guys. Patreon.com/commoncensored. All right, let's keep going. Oh, and I'm coming to Toronto in a month. Toronto. It's
too.
almost, it's getting close to sold out. We added a second show, but that one's getting close to sold out. So
yeah, but I'm also going to be there.
Yes, you're also going to be there.
I'm sorry that you've forgotten already.
No,
Jesus, what an impression I make.
I haven't forgotten. I just kept pressuring you, and you kept dragging your goddamn feet because Toronto, she doesn't like you guys, all right? She doesn't like you one bit. No, she loves you, and she's going to be opening the shows in Toronto, leecamp.com/schedule. All right, let's move on.
Okay, so this past weekend...
Where have you been?
Some of you, well, probably all of you have heard that the climate strike was this past Friday, and some 4 million people across the globe partook in these climate strikes, predominantly youth-led. A lot of people are talking about Greta Thunberg, which is awesome, and...
She means Greta Thunberg.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean Greta Thunberg. That's what I mean. If I meant Greta Thunberg, I would have fucking said that. But that's not how you say her name.
Oh, man, we have to get in the same fight every episode from here on out.
Also, it's not smorgasbord. It's smorgasbord.
Yeah, that's incredible. I enjoy a good smorgasbord.
Just please stop. Just if you can't fucking say it, just say buffet. All right? Just please.
All right. Since we brought her up, in a minute we have to talk about all the shit revolving around her, but we can get to that. Well, let's get to that in a minute, though.
Well, but basically, and some of you might have seen that I posted images from the event in New York City, and kind of a commentary on my site, Art Killing Apathy, and I kind of just wanted to touch on that briefly because I think it's an important.
It's really great. I highly recommend you go read it because it's fucking great.
You just go to artkillingapathy.com and you check out the blog, and it's the first entry there. But basically, I wrote this because as a seasoned activist, it makes me really fucking happy to see, in particular, youth, and I say that I understand that I'm still relatively young, but folks younger than me, like in their teens and younger, at protests. It really fucking inspires me. It fires me up. It gives me hope, right?
I like when like an infant has on a shirt that it doesn't understand, but it says like, there's no planet B, and it's like, that guy gets it.
I know, right? I'm with baby. So here's where my years of activism come into play, and people might say that I'm jaded, but really I'm just realistic. First of all, let's call Friday what it was. It was a parade. And I'm not saying that disparagingly. It's just that a march is something that you do without the help of the NYPD. You do it without the help of the police who direct you like they're directing fucking traffic. You do it without the permission of the state. That is what makes a march. A march is people coming together and saying, you know what? Fuck you, I'm not asking permission. I am doing this because I have to. And that's not to say that parades never have a place, but it's to say that we have to call these things what they are. So Friday was a parade. On top of that, I think it's very important that we recognize that parades in and of themselves do not change anything. They might change people's minds who see that on TV or on social media and they think, fuck, I have to do something. In which case, yes, that is the place of a parade, to inspire the folks who stayed home and don't think that they have to get involved. But to be perfectly honest, we as activists and as people that are listening to this show that obviously are already aware that something's wrong and that we need to do something intense about it, the parade is not the key. And we have to look at, in particular, frontline fights, things like pipeline fights that are happening in communities across the United States, corporate sacrifice zones, whether they be next to chemical plants in Louisiana or next to nuclear storage sites in the West.
Funny how they're where poor people live. Funny how that happens.
Poor and predominantly not white. So we have to look at these fights and recognize that this is where we need people. We don't need people at Battery Park in New York City. Nothing against Battery Park, but no shit is going down at Battery Park.
Well, hold on. Who's going to buy all the tchotchkes at the kiosks? The little buttons.
So, we need to recognize that where people are needed are not at the parades. People are needed at the front lines. And we need to use, if there's something to be taken from this,
super fun sites never have the good soft pretzels.
Yeah, they're not super
outside.
fun. We need to use this, and this is something for organizers and newbies alike. Use this as kind of a jumping off point. Rock yourself off of this momentum to move towards those frontline communities, and also to connect issues. And this is one of the things that I was doing in New York, as I was helping organize around the issues of war, like the military-industrial complex, and climate change, climate chaos. Because the single biggest user of fossil fuels in the entire world is the U.S. military. I'll say that again. The single largest consumer of fossil fuels in the entire world, equal to the consumption of 140 countries, is the United States military.
Greater than 140 countries. Right?
It's equal to 140 countries.
Okay. Also, largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So both.
Right. This is something that cannot be and is often, if not always, overlooked when we talk about climate chaos. This is something that has to be discussed when we talk about the future movements. So really, my sort of critique, and again, understand that me giving a critique is not me shitting on it. There's a difference. A critique is a constructive criticism that we should always use with tactics. Every tactic we use as activists should always come with constructive criticism. Okay, what worked, what didn't, why and why not? What can we learn moving forward? What do we need to do to keep building? That should always be the questions that you ask yourself after an action. And after this one, I think the important lessons are we need to be in the frontline communities. We need to be on those frontline fights with the people that are so often forgotten, the most marginalized Indigenous, Black and Brown, poor communities, and of course poor white communities as well. And on top of that, we also need to recognize that we cannot address climate chaos until we address the U.S. war machine and U.S. imperialism. Without that, we have no climate movement. And I know that the whole Grieta thing is a point of contention as well. And so I want to touch on that before I hand the mic back over.
Damn it, I knew we needed 2 likes.
So a lot of people, and I guess it's also because I'm Swedish, as evidenced by my correct pronunciation of her name.
I can't even hear the sounds you're making when you say her name. I hear.
And that's our ploy, right?
She said on Democracy Now! That there's no wrong way to pronounce her name.
That's because she's just trying to be fucking nice. When she gets older and more bitter like me, she's gonna fucking slap people who say her name wrong. I was more demure when I was 16 too. Although she's a bigger badass than I was when I was 16, and that's kind of the point. People are, and on the left too. I'm not even talking about right wing dickbags who are.
No, forget the right wing. Let's talk about
this is on the left.
A left wing, not even critique, just shit throwing about Greta Thunberg.
That's as close as I can get. Please don't. Please don't. Just say the 16-year-old Swedish girl, okay? Thank you. She who must not be mentioned because I can't say her name right. How about that?
Greta.
No, stop. Okay, so, whew. It's like. I think you're triggering my tinnitus when you say that.
Greta.
Stop. Good God. It's like nails on a chalkboard. Okay, so. I need to go shower. So she doesn't deserve the weight or the hate of this movement. And what I mean,
can I just give a preamble as to, because people might not even know what the fuck we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
There are people on the left who are saying, look, she is, a corporate entity designed by corporate America to soften the climate change movement and redirect it into nice, cuddly things that are allowable for the capitalist state. And, and then they'll show you that there's an image of her fist bumping Obama. And there's, someone said she met with George Soros, who I don't even know if she knows who the fuck he is. But there's a lot, it's not that they don't have like evidence of her doing this thing or that thing. I read they were like, this is our 5-part series about how Greta, sorry.
And she was holding a sign about something with like, let Russia strike or something like that.
Yeah, and they're like, one of her parents, her mother is a celebrity. Oh my God.
Yeah,
and
she's an opera singer.
And yeah, an opera singer. Oh, she's a celebrity. And that means this must be a psyop. Yeah, she's a psyop. And I'm not denying that like any of those photos happened or any of that stuff, but I just wanted to say, so those are their criticisms. So now we can get into what you were saying.
Also, I'd just like to point out that celebrity in Sweden is much different than the U.S. I remember, this is a bit of a tangent, but I remember MTV Cribs. You remember that show? Where they go into famous people's houses and they've got like 40 cars.
And Snoop Dogg is like, these 14 people run the slushy machine and they don't get paid. You're like, how the fuck? What?
Yeah.
They're here for the video. They get to stand in the back of the videos.
So they went to Robin. They went to her apartment in Stockholm, and a lot of you might know her. She's a Swedish pop artist.
This is her mother. Oh.
No, her.
This is someone else.
Her apartment. Robin's apartment.
Okay.
So they went to her apartment in Stockholm, and I remember watching it, and I'm like, whoa, that's a big apartment. But compared to Cribs, it's not. Well, first of all, it's a fucking apartment, right? It's not a house.
Yeah.
It's an apartment in Stockholm, and it's like with this beautiful, tall ceilings and beautiful. But then they like go in at first, and they kind of make a joke out of it. They're like, "Oh, this is where you live? You're like the biggest pop star in Sweden, and this is where you live." And they go into the kitchen, and they're like, "Oh, so what do you got? Like, what do you have here? Oh, wait." You do your own recycling?
They're like, wait, you don't have Dom Perignon to pour on the hose?
Well, no, and she was showing them like her recycling bins, because in Sweden they have pretty strict recycling rules. Like you have to separate
recycling bins.
You have to separate your waste. And they were like, you do this yourself? You don't have people to do this? And it was kind of like a parody, but at the same time, they were really honest. They were like, here's Sweden's biggest pop star, and she's fucking living in like a 2-bedroom apartment in Stockholm and doing her own recycling. So
also, we saw that. Who was the famous Swedish singer we saw the movie about?
What?
We went and saw the movie about her
Monica
bio.
Zetterlund.
So,
she was a jazz singer. In like the 60s.
Midway through that movie, she buys, or with her boyfriend or husband or something, buys a house to live in. And they treat it as if it's the largest mansion that has ever existed. And she's like, and people come over and they're like disgusted. They're like, all of this is for you? And basically it's a McMansion. It's like what an average suburbanite.
It's like a 2-story house
in Tampa with the fake columns that don't hold anything up. It's like,
oh, it was nicer looking than that.
No, I meant that it's that size. I didn't mean to look like that, but I meant that it was that size, and yet people are like coming over and they're like, all of this is yours? So, yes, you're right. Celebrity different. Anyway,
but that's
definite
different.
tangent.
That's different, yes. And her mom is Greta's mom is an opera singer, and yes. But so the Greta thing, what I mean when I say she doesn't deserve the weight or the hate, indigenous, black, brown youth, predominantly on the front lines of the climate crisis, have been fighting for decades. There are still memes floating around of Winona LaDuke. I think Winona LaDuke at the UN in the 70s asking why it's so bizarre to want to protect your water and your land and your air. That was in the fucking 70s. So let's not pretend that youth have just started leading these climate movements and these climate questions. This has been a long-standing thing. It's fine if people are just now being inspired by Greta, but let's not pretend that she is the first person to raise this fight and raise this flag.
Right. And on top of that, it's... And actually, I think she said this in her speech to Congress. It's pathetic that a 16-year-old or a kid is the face of let's have a future. Let's not kill ourselves with extinction.
Yeah.
So it's not she and I think her quote I think in front of Congress was, you shouldn't look upon me with joy or pride. You should look upon me with shame. And I totally agree that this is fucking pathetic.
Well, and here's the thing, like her comments and her honesty and, you know, her ire that she shared in the most recent video is powerful and it's important. And we should share that. We should definitely use this as a tool to inspire folks to join the movement. But let's not pretend that she's responsible for the movement, because that's a problem in two ways. One, it completely ignores, just as I've just mentioned, the people who have been doing this work for decades and who are also coming into the movement that aren't young girls from Sweden. But on top of that, it leads to a sense of apathy, right? Oh, she's got it. I don't have to fucking do anything. I'm going to sit back. And I saw some of these signs in New York, parents holding signs that are like, let the youth lead. We've had our time. No, you fucking haven't. You don't get to go sit in the fucking dugout while we scrap and fucking scrape for our future, you dick. No, like, that's not how this works. This works in a sense of, what can we learn from our elders, but how can we let the youth lead in their perspectives of the future that will be their own? This is a collaborative effort, okay? This cannot be set against the backdrop of what age are you? What race are you? Where are you from? Fucking climate change is something that affects everybody. So the fact that people are using Grieta as an excuse to not do anything is fucking grotesque.
So now let's get to she doesn't deserve the blame.
She doesn't deserve the blame. She's fucking 16. I would just like to know what everyone listening to this podcast, and you can email us and let us know, what the fuck were you doing when you were 16? Were you yelling at Congress for being spineless pieces of shit? Probably not. I wasn't, and I was already politically active.
Or even if you didn't have the fame, were you sitting outside of Parliament alone like she was? I fucking wasn't. I wasn't doing fuck all.
Well, to be fair, you didn't have a parliament, so.
I was writing, I was writing dick jokes in a pad, with a pad. I'd stay up late and I'd be like, oh, I got a good dick joke there. Like, that's what I was doing.
And I mean, I was already politically active. I'd already started doing environmental activism at my school. I had already started doing anti-war activism against the Second Iraq War. But I was not as dedicated as Grieta is. I was still concerned with all the shit that 16-year-olds should be concerned with. And so the other part of this is that she doesn't deserve all this hate. One, because she's already really fucking woke. And secondly, it's like, what do you expect? Well, people are saying she's not radical enough. She met with Obama. Okay, she's not fucking perfect. She's 16. But even if she were 30, why the fuck are we treating her as if she were supposed to be some perfect figurehead? Because here's the other problem with that is, like, what is a perfect figurehead? It depends on who you are and where you stand on that spectrum. There's no reason to have a figurehead, period, much less a fucking 16-year-old who is still developing.
Now, if you want to say that the reason the mainstream media find her acceptable to cover more is because she doesn't have criticisms of capitalism, okay, you can have that. That's a legitimate discussion. But that's not like her fault. She is, young and developing and figuring it out, and probably doesn't know that the entire economic system we have set up is really at the heart of this all. She probably thinks that it's just it's a group of politicians that have decided not to act on climate change. And it's like, okay, well, both of those things are correct. She just hasn't gotten to the latter one yet, which I didn't get to till my late 20s. So
yeah, seriously. Yeah, so basically just that's sort of the gist there, is that doesn't deserve the weight or the hate. And so I think the best thing that we can do is treat her like any voice of this movement. Share when you think she has something powerful to say, and then other than that, fucking do your thing. You do what you are doing. You work on those frontline issues. You fucking organize in your community. Don't waste your energy throwing stones at a fucking 16-year-old. That is pathetic.
And Just one last thing. I think that what I keep coming back to, and this is what I come back to whenever I see criticisms of movements that I largely support, even if I, wish that the name that shall not be spoken were to talk about capitalism more. Whenever I hear criticism of a movement that I largely support, the question is, isn't acting like that criticism is reason to ignore it all or deride it all or trash it all? Isn't that exactly what big oil would want? Don't you think big oil is fucking smart enough to have some idiot write a blog about how Greta has been, co-opted by corporate interest and she's not the real thing? And they're not idiots. They know how to create that type of shit. And if I were big enough, they'd fucking do it to me. All right? They'd say,
well, a lot of them have.
Some of them have, but they'd say, they haven't really dug into my family and been like, oh, his father was in the Pentagon for 20 years. Like, what does that mean? And it's like, well, yeah, he was. He was fucking in the military for 20 years. Like, but that doesn't define who I am. And anyway, I'm just saying, like, whenever it comes down to, wow, big oil must be, rejoicing, or big pharma must be rejoicing, or whatever, the war contractors must love that we are deriding this anti-war movement as not being extreme enough. Those type of things I think should absolutely be in our equation of whether trashing a movement is useful.
Well, and I also think that and we're going to move on, but I think that brings up something that's important, is like, we should have internal discussions about how we organize and what we need to be focusing on. You don't need to air that shit out. You don't need to take time to construct a tweet to throw shit at someone inside the left, right? And of course, people will argue, well, what does the left mean? The left means, to me anyway, the left is anybody that is working towards a livable future where capitalism will necessarily not exist. Whether that means that they have the perfect political understanding of capitalism is not important. Because guess what? A lot of people haven't had the privilege of a great education that lets them understand what capitalism, what neoliberalism, what any of those isms is. But that doesn't mean that they don't want a livable future, that they are not in their own way working towards it. And they should be amongst those Venn diagrams of where you work with people. And I think that this is something that we've talked about on the show before, but those Venn diagrams of working with people where there's crossover. So that means that even if I'm more radical than you, we can find a common ground to build from. And we can find a common ground from which to attack the system together, even if we don't agree on everything. And so I think that is another important takeaway from this whole leftist infighting episode.
And also, because this is a great segue to the next story, can you tell the story about walking out on the Iraq War?
Yeah. So when I was a youngin', I did a walkout at my high school.
In North Carolina.
In North Kakalaki. This was 2002. I was
this was no Greta Thunberg country.
Oh, please stop. But I was fresh off the heels of ninth grade in Sweden, and this was 2002, and I was a sophomore in high school in North Carolina, in Charlotte, and there was a walkout to protest the impending Iraq War, which, spoiler alert, happened.
You didn't stop it? I thought you.
No.
I really thought this was going to be the one.
I know. I tried. I walked out. I had a flower in my hair and everything. I mean, you could have thrown a lot of stones at me as a fucking 16-year-old, let me tell you. But so I did this walkout, and...
How did you have a flower in your hair and a Guns N' Roses patch at the same time?
Is that weird?
Seems a little odd.
I'm an anomaly, wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in torn jeans. So I did this walkout, I did this protest, and I actually ended up, being on the news that day. But I came back to school and was totally ridiculed.
Were there others?
I was the only person from my school. Oh, I take that back. There was one other person that went with
me.
So
there were people marching that day from North Carolina, just not from your school.
Not from my school,
yeah,
no.
Okay.
And when I got back to school, To give you an idea, there were people who had proudly and openly displayed rebel flags on their trucks, on their belt buckles. Like, this was...
You can't beat me. We were the Confederate rebels. That
I
was
know,
our
but
mascot at my
I know,
high school.
I know. So when I got back to school, I was openly ridiculed by pretty much all of the students, except for like the core group of friends that I had. But my friends had not come with me to the walkout. Interestingly enough, like a lot of the staff, the well-educated ones, were on my side, but they couldn't publicly say that because they were afraid of losing their job.
Right.
So, and the reason that I had put this in the show notes is because New York City gave students the day off for Friday, the day of the climate strike, which if you get the day off, it's not a strike. Just FYI.
No, I think that's actually a genius move by kind of like state
absolutely.
officials. It's because you also stop the story of students interrupted school. Like
Exactly.
you can't interrupt business as usual. We're not having business as usual. Cool. Like, so that's a fucking preemptive move by the state, really.
Well, and I was talking to some folks in New York about this and telling them the story of me walking out. And I think and I vividly remember this, I was walking back and I ended up coming back from the walkout like middle of a period, like 7th period or something in school. And I remember walking back up the hallway and I could just like feel eyes on me. And I walked back into my
did
classroom.
you have like a poster? How did they know where you were coming from?
Because I had like a sign and a pin, and also I was like that fucking person. I was like I was like the leftist. And I'd already made an announcement in assembly saying that I don't think we should go to war, and people were booing me, and it was a whole thing. So I vividly remember walking up and just feeling that like, wow, no one's on my side. And I'm not saying that to get the awe response. I'm saying it because actually that fucking fired me up. It fired me up to know I have to do this because there's nobody behind me. There's nobody in front of me. I am the only fucking person in this hallway that went to this. I am needed. I am necessary. If you get the fucking day off and your teacher, your school says, why don't you write a report on your experience at the climate strike? I'm sorry, but that is not radical. And what we need is fucking radical. And even Grieta said that. So I'm not even fucking being like out from left field here. What we need to understand that the systems are not on our side. And that includes New York public schools. That includes the state. When Obama says, oh, Grieta is just the kind of person that we need. Fuck you, Obama. You laid enough pipeline to wrap around the earth twice. You opened up offshore drilling. Fuck you. You went to war for oil. This is not the kind of we need to recognize that the systems are not on our side. And a lot of that starts with recognizing that these sort of ploys, these sort of like, oh, you get the day off, they're not indicative of people who want to work with us. And that is something that I think is very important for the youth to understand. It's important for us as people who are a little older to understand and share. So yeah, that's...
So, speaking of war, great story, by the way. Speaking of war... No, I'm not kidding.
Oh, it sounded sarcastic.
What? Why would I...
Maybe it's just because you're a comedian, so every time you say great story, everyone's like, well, fuck you.
Well, I've
then.
noticed, especially when we're doing the podcast, if I say anything genuine, you just laugh at it. So I got to be careful. No, I'm having a great time here. I am. So speaking of war, let's go on to Saudi Arabia, which Trump has now announced we are sending troops to protect the poor Saudi Arabia against the drone bombings coming from Yemen that they have tried to obliterate.
I thought it was Iran.
Yeah, that we're claiming was Iran, even though we say, well, it came from Yemen, but it was Iran. Come on now.
Well, and spoiler alert, I'm covering this on my show this week.
I covered it last week. Haha.
Well, I'm covering it this way in a different way.
All right.
I'm covering it this week in a different way. Sorry.
Yeah, you are.
Dude, it's been a long few days. Like, can I just say that? Now I lost my train of thought. Yes. So the the amazing way that we have turned the attack that the Houthis have taken responsibility for and made it into, well, in the Saudi ministry on September 18th released a statement that said, well, we're not sure exactly, but it came from the north. So here's the question.
I think that was in Game of Thrones.
You have
all right, go ahead.
You have the most advanced weaponry in the world, and you can't track a fucking drone. Not just a drone, 18 fucking drones you can't track. You can't find those fuckers. And here's the scary thing, is that they didn't. And this is why they can't admit
that their oil infrastructure is completely open.
They are vulnerable, and they are not winning. Because if they were winning, then the Houthis wouldn't have the power to destroy. Like, this was half of their oil production that was shut down because of this attack.
It was 5% of world oil production was shut down by this. And so this is, I mean, obviously you and I are opposed to all wars. We're opposed to all American wars. All of these wars are done for a combination of, oil power and because countries are outside of our central banking system, which we find fucking infuriating. How dare they have their own banking system? So we are trying to crush Iran, but there's a reason. And by the way, the when you aren't listening to the mainstream media, the Pentagon is actually telling Trump they don't want to bomb Iran because you can't win that war. It would end up like fucking Vietnam. Like, there's, 80 million people in Iran. They've got a significant military. And B, they could do shit like this, like Yemen did, or the Houthis did. You can bomb the fucking oil production. You can stop ships from getting through the Strait of Hormuz, is it? And so there's a lot of things Iran can do that if there was a full-on war. And the horrors that would happen if they bombed Israel as well. So it's far more complicated than what our mainstream media is doing, which I watched. Fuck Todd had on Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, which for some odd reason his job is to go on these shows sometimes and act like he defends the Trump administration, which what a fucking tool. But
I feel so bad for you that you have to watch.
Yeah, I don't know why I saw a few minutes of it. But he did the mainstream media thing of, so why is it Trump's not bombing Iran? So should Trump bomb Iran? So is he thinking of bombing Iran? So where would we bomb if we bombed Iran? And then my favorite one is, don't you think this makes Trump look weak? Doesn't this make the United States look weak? Which is what our basically entire Congress is saying. This makes the U.S. look weak. Really? So we should show our strength by obliterating civilians, which their response would be to fucking bomb the fuck out of Saudi Arabia and maybe Israel and probably other places, and Bahrain, where we have our large regatta or whatever the fuck, and Qatar and all of these American installations that they would then bomb. Really, that would make us look strong? That would, look what we did. We killed all these civilians and they killed our soldiers, and yay, look how strong we are.
Well, this goes back to the first time that mainstream media or corporate media ever called Trump presidential was when he bombed Syria.
Right.
That was the first time that he was all of a sudden a fucking a man of the state. He was a fucking strong man when he finally bombed Syria. And of course, like again,
and he's not a strong man for trying to create peace with North Korea. What a weakling.
Exactly. And of course, like, again, the totally fucked up thing here is that not only is Iran saying we had nothing to do with this, like, what could we possibly gain from bombing Saudi oil production? But the Houthis already took responsibility precisely because they want to show Saudi Arabia, you keep fucking with us, you keep creating genocide and absolute devastation in our country, we can do this to you. Yeah. And that is what is so scary to not only Saudi Arabia, but of course to the United States. And so this was, once again, a good opportunity to take this like very clear show of vulnerability by the Houthis and redirect it to Iran, which we've been just aching for a reason to bomb for many years. So this is, and now of course, Saudi troops. Well, potato. U.S. troops are going to Saudi Arabia.
And isn't it funny that you remember under Obama the big thing was, don't worry, we're not putting any troops on the ground. No troops
no
on the
boots
ground.
on the ground.
No boots on the ground. In Syria, we're not going to put boots on the ground. And here it's the reverse. It's like, don't worry, we're not going to bomb. We're putting boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and of course this escalation is only going to create the space for more Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia.
I just remembered something that's a perfect segue. Unfortunately, it's a segue back to earlier, but I just remember I was like, all right, and let's keep in mind that we are helping a fucking awful, horrible regime in Saudi Arabia that literally took some of their oligarchs, kept them in a hotel, and tortured them until they gave away all their money or whatever. Like, no, I have no problem with giving away money, but maybe you shouldn't torture the motherfuckers. They also had a journalist executed that is now widely tortured and then executed. Now widely, a Washington Post journalist executed, and we're still their buddies. We're their allies. This horrific regime. And meanwhile, Joe Biden is concerned with the corruption of this prosecutor in the Ukraine. He's worried about that. Yeah, do you think, considering the dictators we're friends with, we support 70% of the world's dictators. Mm-hmm. We are friends with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Duterte in the Philippines. We are friends and allies with the most horrible people. But Biden wanted to get this prosecutor out because he was corrupt. Anyone else? Anyone still believe that? Did I put enough stank on the delivery there so that people can realize how ridiculous Biden's excuse is?
Well, yeah, and again, this just opens up the floodgates for every other argument. We want to get rid of Maduro because he's a dictator. Oh, you mean the fact that he subsidizes food programs for the poor people in the country and he continues to build housing even though
by 50%?
Some $70 million, at least $70 million are stuck in like banks across Europe that they don't have access to their own fucking oil proceeds.
Well, the Bank of England refuses to give them back $2 billion in gold.
$2 billion.
$2 billion in gold.
It must be somebody else that has $70 million.
Well, I think you're just quoting a different number of funds that are locked up, but the Bank of England
either way,
the Bank of England specifically won't release. It's like close to $2 billion that is like Venezuelan gold sitting in the Bank of England,
right?
Which you'd think it might be bad for a bank's business for people to find out that they can just decide not to give it to you, but
no. But yeah, so it's just, again, this just opens up the floodgates to prove that we are never on the side, the U.S. is never on the side of actual countries fighting for autonomy and fighting for progress. And we can argue about whether Iran is a perfect country or Venezuela, because of course they're not. There's no such fucking thing as a perfect country. But it is not our place to dictate how they should govern and what their people should fight for. And incidentally, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, I know, but incidentally, when I had an Iranian...
Changing the name of the show to Tangent.
When I had an Iranian peace activist on my show, she made a very good point. She said that, yes, there are, in particular, women's groups in Iran that have been fighting very hard for women's rights and, the progress inside of Iran. But what the extreme economic warfare has done, it's quieted down the protests against the Iranian government. Instead, everybody's working together to protest the U.S.
Really?
So what you're really doing by fucking intervening in these countries is you are taking away the people. You're taking away basically the power from people who are protesting their governments and saying, we want change, we want reforms, we want you to do better. And you're just creating them as enemies of your own intervention, because what's a better way to get people to work together than to attack them all, right?
Well, and apparently communities in Venezuela very much work together to help the poorest and those with the least among the community. But yeah, but the economic war is horrific. I mean, people are dying every day.
And that's another thing that I'll be covering in my show this week.
Which will be at artkillingapathy.com.
Indeed. And Free Speech TV.
Indeed. And on Free Speech TV. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you feel like you got even $1 of content out of this. Go to patreon.com/common censored. We're headed over there to do a little premium content. And if you're in Washington, D.C., please come join me for a live taping of Redacted tonight. Almost every single Thursday we're there. So just go to leecamp.com, click on the schedule tab. Okay. Is that all?
Yeah.
Oh, email us at, what's the email address?
commoncensored@protonmail.com, and we will get to some listener comments next week for sure.
All right. We love you guys. Keep fighting out there.
Act out.